Well, thank you for coming and speaking to our group. We just finished the film and got some snacks. And yeah, does anyone have any questions? Maybe you can wave and say hi.
Hello.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or thoughts that they want to ask Chico? How are the black flies up there?
Well, we have two seasons basically. They come in waves and then they leave. Yeah. And we're in the first wave right now. But I'll say that the black flies here, I mean, I can work outside without bug dope, so they're not obviously not as bad as I've experienced in other places, but they're still, pretty annoying. So.
Someone is asking how they can have access to the to the movie.
Mhm.
And we just showed it on CBC Gem. It's like a
That's
CBC
correct.
online play, and you can watch it for free, I think. So
That's correct. Yeah, it's free, and then if you pay, I think $6 a month, it's ad free on the CBC Gem platform. But yeah, I think you need an account, which is free. But anybody in Canada can watch it on CBC Gem.
I was curious about um, like organic farming practices. And see if there's any things like whatever you're going to share.
did you hear that one?
I did not know. Sorry, I could hear somebody talking, but
So somebody asked what specific organic farming practices that you're using, and if you could share more about those practices that you use on the farm.
for sure. Yeah, so our focus is Indigenous food sovereignty. And so we teach a wide variety of growing techniques on our farm. We're very, very careful to be non-dogmatic. Like, a lot of us suffer from the traumas of enforced religion, for example, which is a form of dogma. So we're the same when it comes to growing methods in agriculture, is we don't subscribe to any particular type of agriculture. And everything we look at is through that Indigenous lens of Indigenous food sovereignty. So for example, we don't call ourselves an organic farm or like a regenerative farm or a conventional farm. We don't use any of those terms, but we do teach a wide range of techniques. And the idea is that somebody could, as you see in the film, somebody could start growing their own food in their own yard with very basic tools. So that's the entry level. And we do what people would call no-till or low tillage food production. And that is very deeply rooted in Indigenous agriculture. If you go back and look at the early diaries and letters from the first settlers that settled in British Columbia, they talk a lot in those very early letters and diaries about Indigenous food systems that they witnessed and how incredibly productive they were. So one of the interesting things is what's now called regenerative agriculture or permaculture is very much drawn out of Indigenous agriculture, which made heavy uses of mulching, for example, and was a no-till farming system. So we do a lot of that teaching, which is about boosting biodiversity and trying not to decrease biodiversity with our methods, or having as compensating for impacts as much as we can. So that's the entry level. Is like basically pitchforks, rakes, things that you can get at your local hardware store. And we have a field that we teach in, and you see snippets of it within the film. And then we have another field that we call triangle field, which is leveled up from that, which is basically still hand tools, so no machinery. But it's like, hey, if you got a couple $1,000s to spend, then let's upgrade to things like a broad fork instead of a pitchfork. Let's like invest in a really good seeder, for seeding. Let's invest in some really nice trays for transplanting. And then outside of that, we have what we call our big fields, which is more of the conventional type of agriculture where we use tractors, and you see some of that in the film as well. And the idea of those is to say, hey, if you suddenly need to feed a whole lot of people, and you don't have, like we did in the old days, you don't have like every single family member and all your kids to get out there and grow your food, you're going to have to use a tractor. So a lot of us First Nations communities, we're stuck at low capacity where we don't have a lot of people who are trained because that knowledge was stripped. And so it's about, hey, like, can we get three, four, five people trained? And you've got enough land, let's get that tractor out there and let's grow a ton of food. Like for us, we grow about 10,000 pounds of food per acre on our farm. And we have about a little over 3 acres in production right now.
What are some of the methods of preservation of last over the winter, or perhaps if we're following season, have a or like drying or pickling or canning? Are you doing methods?
You hear that?
I heard, is it about food preservation? Is that the
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, he's asking what food preservation methods you're using at the farm and gave a few examples, but yeah, just wondering about that.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a smokehouse that we built a couple of years ago. It was inaugurated the same year as the filming. And so smoking is a big traditional method here. And you don't need, again, a whole lot of sort of equipment to do smoking of fish and meat and things like that. We also teach saltwater fermentation, which I'm a huge, huge fan of. It was a big part of the traditional diets of First Nations peoples in this part of the world. Unfortunately, we don't have the climate of Lillooet, of St'át'imc territory, of like the hot, dry winds to do the dried kind of preservations that you see down there. Up here, we're more traditionally coastal climate. So you're going to see things like the saltwater ferments and the smoking as the two main ways of preserving food long term. And then, of course, all the modern methods, like we have a freeze dryer, we've got a drying, dehydrating unit. We teach pickling, jarring, canning, obviously freezing. A lot of people don't know that you can freeze a lot of vegetables as well as meats. So we do a lot of that. Like we've got the vacuum packer and sealer and things like that. So yeah, it's just like the full range. And again, a lot of our focus is on affordability because, like I said in the film, we're desperately like within the First Nations population here, there's desperate kind of low income levels. So you can't just say, oh, go buy a whole bunch of jars, at Walmart and start jarring all your food, or go buy a pressure canner and start pressure canning. So we have to consider the low resources that we're in and teach them, which is something, again, that we're in a Tea Creek. So the kitchen you see in the film, it's literally a woodshed. They had no power, no water in 2021 when we started, and no floor. I mean, we managed to get some salvage wood and put it down for a dirt floor, and then we got little grants, and we were able to eventually bring some basic power in there. We were able to bring some sort of water, like it's still like garden hose kind of along the surface, and we were able to double the size of the woodshed, which is what you see in the film. Like, but we're cooking over camp stoves, and so that's our capacity level. And then the other challenge we have with food preservation is we just don't have a lot of indoor space, so we're really at the mercy of weather. So there's a lot of things we're looking forward to being able to do once we have enough indoor space, like a nice modern barn, for example, which is like more seed saving, for example, which is something we're not able to do because we just aren't able to dry our seeds. Like we don't have the climate for it. And here you have to have indoor space to dry, and we just don't have enough of it. So I'm sitting right now in we call our farmhouse, which is about 600 square feet. And up until this year, this was our only office space. And at the time of filming, we had, with our staff and trainees who were on our payroll, we had 50 people. And we're operating everything out of less than 600 square feet of indoor space. So yeah, necessity is the mother of invention. And so you'll find that we've been very creative here with our solutions.
Thank you. We had one question. Why is it called Tea Creek?
Yeah. So we have a creek that flows right through the farm. It's called Tea Creek. You see it in the film. You'll in shots of the water flowing over the rocks. That's CD, which is Tea Creek in the Gitxsan language here. And the English is just a translation of Gitxsan. CD literally means tea water in Gitxsan. And so the settlers called it Tea Creek after the Gitxsan name, and it goes right through the middle of our farm. And so we just named ourselves after the creek.
I was wondering, in Canada now, there's like some kind of federally a push for more independence about food. Do you think that in any way you can plug into that for your funding?
So federally, there's a push for food. Is that what you said?
Oh, I'm saying that because of tariffs and all of this,
Oh,
the food security is all of a sudden like, oh yeah, people
yeah.
start thinking about that. But it sounds like maybe that would be a stream in federal government money. I don't know if that's something you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think so. Like, and that's been my hope. And I have been reaching out, federally for years. So the interesting thing is the tariffs really just exacerbated what was already a desperate problem within Canada, which is that Canada is currently losing an average of 6 farmers a day.
Oh,
6 farmers a day right now. So the economy is already short thousands and thousands of food producers. And the estimate, that came out in the newspaper last year, or was it 2 years ago? It was a Royal Bank did a report and said that the Canadian food system will completely collapse in 2030 around that time, unless there's a major intervention to bring in a whole bunch new food producers. So not just farmers, but people who are in any part of the Canadian food economy, because it's not just what are called primary producers, like say fishermen or ranchers or farmers or people with vineyards or orchards. It's also all of the what they call the value added, right? Like the people who can actually, like there's a problem opening new abattoirs in BC right now to process animals because there's a shortage of workers to work in the abattoirs. So like they've been shutting down, right? Even though there's a high demand for them. So the problem was already there before the tariffs. And so I've been pitching to say, hey, we have the solution. Like Tea Creek has trained, per year more people into agriculture than all the other government funded programs in the province put together. Like our kind of the other conventional programs are teaching like 15 to 30 people a season. In that year that you see the filming, we had over 300 people sign up for training, and we were able to train 192 people here at Tea Creek that year. And it was a very, very, very busy year. But unfortunately, I can't get the time of day from the province, and I've talked to many ministers and deputy ministers and assistant deputy ministers and chiefs of staff and executive directors, which I find very frustrating because I have friends in all over the place in the mainstream agriculture sector now in BC. They can't believe we're not funded because the province does directly fund other non-Indigenous agricultural associations and groups. I've not been successful there. And then 2023 was the last year that we got provincial support for our training. And they turned the taps off after that year, despite saying that they would fund us if we had a mandate, and we got that in spades. As you see at the end of the film, the BC Assembly of First Nations gave us a unanimous resolution of support. So to understand how significant that is, that's every single band council in BC voting yes and saying, calling on the province and the federal government to fund us as a high priority, and we still don't have any funding from the province. So it's been very, very piecemeal. And then federally, yeah, we've been pitching. I'll tell you the quick story with the federal minister of agriculture, which is kind of sadly hilarious and disgusting at the same time. And you're welcome to laugh at this story. So, through us becoming food hero with the United Nations said, hey, we can get you a meeting with a federal minister of agriculture. So I said, yes, please. So they arranged the meeting along with the support of our local MP. And so we got this meeting, and the minister at the time was French Canadian. And I was like, look, we've got this solution. We want to work together. We want to basically turn around this problem of Canada losing, six to 10 farmers a day and the whole economy, food economy collapsing in the next 4 years. Open the door for us First Nations people to get back in. And she said, well, I don't really understand First Nations people, so that's why I haven't done anything. So I was like, what? And she's like, well, I didn't grow up around First Nations. I'm not really familiar with First Nations people. Like, I'm not familiar with the culture. So that's why we're not doing anything. And I was like, so you personally didn't grow up around First Nations, and that's why we don't have a federal policy or program around this? So I was saying, like, the answer is simple. Just support us. You don't have to know anything about First Nations. We know all about First Nations. So just get behind us and we'll partner and we'll solve this problem. And of course it didn't happen. So yeah, it's been a real tragedy. The funding with government has been an absolute, tragedy or comedy, I guess is the point. You start to look at it after like 5, 6 years, when you start looking at the absurdity of the reasons that are given. And the last thing I'll say on that is um, we have checked all the boxes and then some. So we were told we needed a First Nations mandate. We have it. We have the resolution from the Northern First Nations Alliance. We now have it from the BC Assembly of First Nations. We also got a resolution from the National Assembly of First Nations Executive Committee, which is all the chiefs of elected chiefs of each province in the country, is also unanimously passed a resolution. We were told we needed to be like an educational institution, so we went through this multi-year process to become designated in horticulture by Skilled Trades, which is the highest authority you can get in the trades. And we became the first Indigenous horticulture site in the country, and we still can't get a penny, right, from from government. So anyway, so the excuses are ridiculous. I could bore you guys with all the stories of how incredibly discriminatory and racist the government still is. So all those policies that are mentioned in the film, a lot of them were very recent, right? Pass and permit wasn't removed as a policy until 2014. Like, what is that, 11 years ago? It was still an active policy in this country. So, and just so you know, passing permit is what stopped First Nations from buying seeds, being able to purchase a tractor, being able to sell their goods. And that's why we still have like things that I run into, like trying to get free training from WorkSafe BC a few years ago, and they were all excited, and then they found out I was First Nations. They're like, no, First Nations have to pay. I'm like, what? So they said, no, no, yeah, we sorry, but it's free for everybody else, but if you're First Nations, you have to pay for the training. Of course, I protested, and they've now since changed it. It also means that when I went to apply for a bank loan from the Canada's Farming Bank, I was turned away and refused because they had a no First Nations lending policy in 2023. And they'd only ever loaned money to a First Nations person or entity once in the history of the province. So, yeah, the barriers I tell people are real. And if you're non-Indigenous, a lot of times the advice we get, it doesn't apply because we're still treated in a super racist, oppressive lens by those decision makers. Those banks, that bank had a no First Nations lending policy in 2023. And I had to shame them. I had to go to the Senate. I had to go public with it in order to get that overturned, right? So yeah, the challenges, the barriers are real, the discrimination's real. It's really disappointing because we have something that actually works, that actually saves lives, that actually introduces tons of fresh blood into our local regional economies that this country supposedly desperately needs. And yet we can't get a call back from anybody in government. So that's the end of that long story. Yeah.
So where do you get funding from? And what, is there anything that, Jeff can do to?
Yeah, so we're funded piecemeal right now. So what that means is I have a part-time fundraiser on staff who we apply for every single grant or program or contract that we're eligible for. So that means we apply for like 15 to 20 million every year. And, you know, we're lucky if we can land a couple percentage of that. And then a lot of that funding is 1 year or one program. So sometimes we luck out, and every year we luck out. Every year we stave off death in the winter with last second funding that comes through at government fiscal year end or whatever it is, like organizational. Like most organizations are on a March fiscal year end. We're not. We're on a calendar. Like our fiscal year ends December. So there's something called March Madness, and usually every March we're limping into it with the lights barely on. And my wife and I are looking at our plans B, C, D, and E that we have, and then literally like the last 2 weeks of March this year, we had 1.5 million come in the door. That completely changed our year and made it possible for us to, you know, build our longhouses and greenhouses and do the things we're doing this year. So but that's not sustainable. And I keep telling people and telling them like we can't, nobody can really exist this way, especially at the level that we've been operating. And I just want to be really, really clear because this comes up at every Q&A. We're not asking for new money. The money, there's tons of money out there, and it already is paying for all the things we're doing. It's just not coming to Indigenous-led groups like us. So what I mean by that is like our local post-secondary institution that's public, currently receives, you know, $30 million, and most of that a year, and most of that is to teach and train First Nations people. Um, Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story. In 2021, our first year of operation, we delivered training for the whole year. I went down to Vancouver to present to Skilled Trades BC, which used to be called Industry Training Authority or ITA. Now, this is the important point, is I presented how many First Nations people we had introduced to trades in every trade, like carpentry, cooking, machine operation, horticulture, etc. Okay. Roofing, painting, like all different trades. So I kept track of those numbers, and we had a lot of people come through our site that year. It was over 1,000 different First Nations people came here. Um, and so I presented those numbers, and everybody gasped. And I had to stop my presentation. I said, "What's going on?" And they all started talking to each other. And they said, "You just introduced more First Nations people to trades in BC than all of the other programs in the province put together." So this is a very important point. And so what we're saying is, why aren't we getting a piece of that funding? Like, why is it that that money is going to non-Indigenous companies, for-profit companies, private, you know, for-profit companies, public organizations that are all non-Indigenous, mostly non-Indigenous, and we get nothing? So what we've been saying is, hey, we're transforming the Indigenous trades economy here. Like we doubled, apparently, the number of First Nations in trades in the Northwest from 10% to 20% of the workforce. Where's the funding? So we're not asking for anything new. We're just like, if we just got the same funding formula that non-Indigenous organizations got per First Nations student, we'd be fine. We wouldn't need any more money from anywhere else. We could be operating with doing everything we're doing, providing mental health supports, you know, great instruction, land-based, culturally safe, First Nation staff, all that's all. So it's really, really a simple ask. It's just like, hey, government, just give us the same funding formula you give to all the non-Indigenous groups, and we're fine. Especially considering our impacts and everything. Why aren't you doing it, right? Yeah.
In order, because I think we have Sharon, Kim, and so that's three, and Martin. Okay. It might help if you come here to this computer to say it. Someone's wondering if how the best way to reach out to you and what info I could share, or should I just maybe the website, or how can people contact you?
So we have an email on our website, info@Tea Creek. I do check that. I don't check it every day, but I was just in there yesterday, responding to emails. So info@tcreek.ca email. We've got social media. I do check and quite frequently respond to comments. Again, not every day, but I do go through all of them, and we post a lot on social media. So that's another thing I recommend is if you want to stay in touch with us and see what we're doing. And I always tell people, you want some good news in your day? Like we're doing so many cool things here that I think are really inspiring and uplifting and interesting. I do post as well like tutorial videos. I just filmed one the other day on weeding, for example. I don't know if I'll post it, but so that's the best way is the email and then social media. Yeah.
We have someone wondering how you get your trainees and how you find that, yeah, like recruitment of trainees and the different methods you use.
Word of mouth. It's all word of mouth right now. Like we actually stopped advertise. Like we did posters and stuff the first year. But what happened is it took off so fast because what happened is once First Nations, Indigenous people came here, and it's in a phenomenal place, they told all their friends and family. So it just like we stopped advertising because we can't handle right now. Not we're not even close to being able to handle the number of people who want to come here. So we without any advertising, just people coming on our website and registering, hearing from their friends and family. We're like over 120 registered for training, and we only have funding for 20 people this year. So we're not advertising. And so that's primarily how it's done. And it's really interesting because again, we have the opposite problem of mainstream programs. Like a lot of mainstream programs struggle to recruit and then retain First Nation students. We have the opposite problem. We get funded for 20 people. We get 120 and 30 people sign up through word of mouth. And we're like, oh no, how do we whittle this down to 20 people? And then 20 people, like we just brought on, I think 8 people that are high risk that are, how do I put it? Like it's a new program we have like where people can just come and try it out here. And the whole idea with that is letting people drop out, right? Like drop out and drop back in, and and none of them have dropped out, right? Like they're still here weeks later, and they're still showing up on time every day and working and joining in and having fun. And so we really have the opposite problem is we started with, 6 and we're like, okay, this is pretty good. And then 2 more showed up, right? And then nobody stayed home. Nobody stays home, they all show up. So that's the difference of Indigenous-led. Like when you are a First Nations Indigenous person coming here, you see yourself in all of us, you know, and that makes a huge difference. And that's what we heard from these 8 people is that they experience racism in other schools they've gone to that's really bad, or workplaces like violence, I would call it. It's not even racism is too nice of a word for what they experience. And so coming here in a place where they're respected and valued and there's a safe space, they just this is where they want to be. So, yeah.
Did you hear that one?
No, I didn't hear it at all. Sorry.
Um, so we're wondering how the production of the film came to be and the response.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it came
And
to,
what the result and the result and the response from that
yeah.
since launching the
Been
film.
amazing. The results and response has been absolutely incredible. Like just me being here, I had no idea the screening was happening, except we were at the Statler Immunity Gathering, and then we saw the poster at the coffee shop in Lillooet, and so I offered to be here. Normally, I wouldn't, right? But I had no idea the screening was happening. So it's a great curiosity to me on how you found out about it because CBC has not really promoted it at all. Like it's not there's no banners, they haven't done any advertising, you have to search for it on CBC Gem. So just like our training, the film is spreading through word of mouth, which I think is really cool. And again, a big testament to Tea Creek, because I'm sure some of you are probably going to go and tell your friends and family. Like my favorite story of this Oh, and the other thing is, I got to say, like, I was prepared for some hate mail. I was prepared for, people to react negatively as well, small percentage, to kind of write me some hate letters, because that tends to be what happens when you go public with kind of anything. It hasn't happened. I haven't received, to me anyways, or to anyone I'm aware of here, a single negative, message kind of thing. And it's been quite the opposite. So my favorite story was um, the daughter of a retired rancher in BC sent a message to the producer of the film, and she said, "I want you to know how much this impacted my dad, who's a retired rancher. He saw the film, and he wrote in his Christmas card to all his friends and family. He asked for them for his Christmas present that year, he wanted them to watch the Tea Creek film." So, so I just think that's like the biggest, like, kindest, most amazing endorsement, is that we're reaching old retired ranchers. Like, I never ever in my wildest dream, and I say that in the film, I say, like, wouldn't it be incredible if we can get non-Indigenous people to talk about the importance of Indigenous food sovereignty? And that's happening at the grassroots level. So I'm just like, wow, that is the biggest, like, it gives me goosebumps. Like, I have them right now. In terms of how the film happened, it was not us. I don't know why or what happened. It was really weird. We are kind of semi-remote, especially compared to, I don't know, we're similar to Lillooet, like, further north, but you know what it's like, right? Like, people in Vancouver probably have never heard of Lillooet and don't know where it is. I remember that when I lived in Vancouver. And so people don't know where we are. So we were up in the middle of nowhere, and guess what it might have been is a local reporter did a story on us, and it won a national award, and then that picked up attention from filmmakers. So we actually had two film crews come here. The film crew that did this film was one of the two. The other one didn't go ahead. Nothing happened with it. This one, it did go ahead, and CBC picked it up. So they actually filmed what they call a sizzle reel, like a pitch. But it wasn't us. It was all done outside of us. The really thing that I think makes this film phenomenal, to me, anyways, like, when I watch it, I still think, wow, there's so much in this film. Like, if you watched it once, watch it again. There's gonna be a lot more in there you missed the first time. It's so rich, so detailed, and the filmmakers included us, which is highly unusual. Like, we got to see it early rough cut, and we got to give them feedback, and they evolved it. And I think that helped keep the film really authentic and really real. That because they did that, and I know that's not normal. So
In the film, we saw a lot of images of the beautiful meals being prepared on site.
Yep.
And we also saw during the harvest season that you gave away all
Yep.
your vegetables to the local communities.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people who are experiencing food insecurity are also experiencing housing insecurity.
Yep.
I thought you might want to just talk a little bit about the importance of community kitchens, because a lot of the people who use the food bank don't actually have dishes to cook on and means of cooking that food.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, no, I'm 100%. We're on the same page there. Like, here, within First Nations communities, the average number of people per household, I believe, is 9 per household. And as I say in the film, the median incomes are like 20 to 30,000. Very, very low incomes, very overcrowded housing. As soon as we move outside of the First Nations communities, even right here in this valley, the sort of non First Nations community, the average per household is 2 to 3, and the median income is up near 70, $80,000. So, like, there's a huge gap here. And what we're seeing is that a roughly 15% of the people who sign up to come here are completely unhoused, like you said, like tents, living under bridges, whatever, right? Couch surfing, perhaps, not knowing where they're going to sleep tonight. And that's a very high percentage, like 15%. And those are just the people who manage to get to a computer to fill in the application. So, yeah, it's a real big problem. And when we see people so-called fail, like not able to graduate the training or not able to continue, unsafe housing is usually the top reason. So it is something that needs to be solved hand in hand. If any of you are policy people, go on our website, go to media, scroll down to I think 2023, and you're going to see a very important paper we wrote called the Discussion Paper on Indigenous Food Sovereignty. It's a wonderful paper, and this is one of the things we talk about is needing to reform, for us anyways, the agricultural land reserve, to allow First Nations to do their own vision of agriculture, which always includes housing. Like that's what we're trying to do here. We're an agricultural land reserve, we're off reserve, and it's an agricultural land reserve, and we're not technically allowed to do anything like close to housing on ALR land. So we're now looking at non-agricultural land that we can buy and get money to put affordable housing there, but do it with food production as well. Because, yeah, the meals, the cooking. So even when we can barely afford to, we cook meals together and we eat them together. Like that's a part of our organizational culture, but it's also part of our First Nations culture is that we all eat together. We share experiences, we bond. The food is so critical to any culture, really. So yeah, housing, food production, sharing meals, all goes hand in hand. Absolutely.
I have just one more question with regard to the way the Crown land is transferring more now to Indigenous control.
Mhm.
And what are some of the challenges you face with experimental permaculture projects at the landscape level? Here in Lillooet, we have vast areas that have been burnt
Yep.
completely, right
Yep.
down to basically no soil. And I see it as a great opportunity to try experimental permaculture in those areas
Mm.
where just some of the problems faced at the bureaucratic level with trying to do permaculture at the landscape level as a way to adapt to food security and climate change.
Yeah, so I think the First Nations having some leverage in some parts of the province over Crown land, public land, or whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, but non fee simple private land is amazing. Here, what that means is we're working with the hereditary chiefs, like the traditional title holders, who are exerting some leverage. They don't unfortunately have full control over Crown land, but they do have a lot of leverage. And so we're starting to do some really fun stuff together. So one thing we're doing is they're drawing in the logging companies and saying, you got to go consult with T Creek before you go and log. So I had this really interesting meeting with the biggest logging company here, and I said, hey, why can't we interplant indigenous food species with your, saw log species in order to regenerate what was already here, which was forest gardens, indigenous, ancient forest gardens. And they said, there's nothing stopping us. There's no law saying we're not allowed to do that. And they're like, if you want us to do that, we'll do it. I was like, seriously? Is that easy? Like, okay, let's do it then. So we've actually had what they've been doing is whenever they do a cut here, they've got to do something for us, and that's something the hereditary chiefs have told them they have to do because the hereditary chiefs here want us to succeed and see that we're a part of the fabric of the greater community now. So we had equipment here clearing strips for, I guess, what you would call agroforestry, like where we're planting crops and food crops in strips in the forest, with the intention to regenerate what was here before, which was vast food forest buffers, or what they called here gardens. They didn't call them forests; they called them gardens in the traditional language, that radiated from every settlement, and there were many settlements. So I think there's incredible opportunities to started flipping the scripts. Now, about your situation you mentioned with the sterilized land, that's what you're talking about. When you have fires that burn so hot, they sterilize the land, they kill your bacteria, they kill your fungus, they kill your seed stock. They basically turn that soil into dust. Um, that's a that's a fresh problem that is we can't really draw from our culture on that because this is new, like this extreme climate, temperatures, the lack of traditional burning that used to keep the fodder down, causing the fires to be hot as well. It's not just climate change, it's just very poor forest management, and the stamping out of of seasonal burning that happened in BC. So I think reclaiming sterilized land absolutely possible. It's totally doable if the right species, but it's not cheap. Like it takes a lot of seeds, it takes a lot of effort, money of some kind. But what we're learning is Mother Nature isn't able to do it on her own, because we've caused this damage and we have to be part of the repair. So yeah.
Practice, like after the winter program, how
The next question is, do you have a way of tracking the trainees and the success you've had, and also like following up with them after to see how they're doing? And yeah, how do you kind of look at success in that area of the farm?
Yeah, so the current training contract we have, which like I said, we're going to be training about 20 people here this year, requires us to track them for I think 3 and 6 months after their training. And so it's just, checking in with them, seeing how they're doing, asking, hey, how are you doing, right? And that's how we track them. Um, Past training contracts didn't require us to do that, but often we knew because we're pretty tight in the First Nations community. Probably my favorite story of, seeing how people did. Okay, I got to tell you a couple. I know I'm talking too much, but this is this was like, I think, yes, it was year one. So it's 2021, and we had a community hire us. So they paid us their own money, which doesn't happen a lot. But they wouldn't take no for an answer because they were going to send their trainees to Vancouver to a non-Indigenous program, and they really wanted them to come here once they heard about what we were doing. So they literally showed up with a check and were like, "Here you go, and here's your trainees." Like, it was really crazy. What we didn't know at the time is that all of the trainees they sent us were on welfare. So there are people who were isolated in the community who had, a lot of them had never worked before. We didn't know that. They were just trainees. And so they went through our training program, graduated. One of the trainees, so I'll tell you the end, like the follow-ups we did, so this is a cohort of, I don't know what it was, 12 people, something like that. Every single one graduated. Everyone who started finished. Um, and our graduations are competency based. So that's really important to know. That's something that differentiates us in a good way, is that we focus on you being able to do what needs to be done, not write a written test with knowledge, but actually do. So if you're a carpenter, you have to be able to do all the carpentry tasks that are required, or if you're a farmer, all the farming tasks, or if you're a machine operator, all the machine tasks. So we do what is called competency testing, and people know if you want to graduate, you have to pass the competency test. Okay, so I'm at the graduation, and one of the students who excelled, he just opened right up, super brilliant guy, became one of the natural leaders. And for the graduation ceremony, we invite the whole community to come, and then we go on a tour of the farm, and the day before, the trainees decide who's going to lead which part of the tour. So everybody has to take the lead. Okay. So we were at the field, and this trainee was speaking and explaining what was happening and everything that we were doing. And the lady from the community standing next to me grabbed my arm super tight. And I like looked down at her like, what is it? And she said, "He's my nephew. I have never heard him speak before."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "He was a shut-in. He lived in the basement. I've literally never heard his voice." So I was like, what? Like, this is wild. Like, this guy, he's incredible. So that in cohort, every single one of them ended up getting hired. So what happened is, because the community came, and one was some leadership of businesses, and like one was the band manager of the community, and they were so impressed with the trainees that they all got a job. Like, one of them is now a senior manager, ended up managing, I think, $1 billion worth of projects in the community. Like, really wild. Like, I like to tell that story because, it's a bit of an outlier with how successful those cohorts were. But it actually works. And a lot of times when trainees sort of fail after training, it's what we talked about earlier, like lack of safe housing. That's one of the biggest things when things don't work. that we see is that they don't have they come into a safe space here and then they go back into an unsafe space, and it's not functional. One of those stories is a trainee. The last story I'll tell, I promise, about this. Living in a tent in the forest, had to hike 9 kilometers to get to the highway where we could pick them up. So they were living like over 4 kilometers in the bush. So it was 9 kilometers return trip. When we graduated, he was one of our perfect students, like perfect attendance. Like he didn't miss a single day. and and graduated and did so well. And actually, he's one of the people in the film. I won't say which person, but he's in the film. And yeah, and hasn't done so well since. Like because you kind of go right, like if you're going to go back into a disadvantaged situation, it's really hard to kind of keep that momentum. So yeah, you sometimes doesn't always work out for everybody. Yeah.
I had a question that sort of maybe builds on that topic, but in the film, you said something like how you do things different. It's like it's our job
Mhm.
to help Indigenous people show up.
Mhm.
And I just want to know, like, if you could talk about that more, like the different ways that you help the community members show up and the kind of extra mile that you go to that's different than a different program, I guess.
Yeah, well, the main thing for us is transportation. Like transportation is a huge problem here. Very, very few people have transportation. We learned that in our first training program. We'd have someone who wanted to join our program, and I'd say, okay, do you have a ride? And they'd say, no. What about your parents? No. Or what about anybody in your household? No. And then we'd be like, what about your extended family, aunties, uncles? Like, because we were like, we'll pay them gas money if they can get you here. And they'd say, no, I don't know anybody who has a running vehicle. Like, oh, okay. Like that's pretty harsh. And so we started sending vehicles out. So we try and hire people to give rides on sort of that first program. And since then, and then we learned we had to send out our own vehicle just because there were some people who were so isolated socioeconomically that there wasn't anybody in their entire circles that had running vehicles. So keep in mind, we're like our socioeconomics here are very, very poor. So yeah, so we have three used beater van, like res vans that have a lot of kilometers put on them every year. They're barely holding together. I just spent, unfortunately, a lot of money getting all our vehicles repaired for the season, and then two of them broke down already. Like, so that's one of the concrete things we do, and that's probably the biggest one is giving people rides. And what I referenced in the film, this is actually a really funny part of the film, is I actually say and really call out mainstream institutions for taking money to train First Nations people, and then they fail and they don't have to give the money back most of the time, almost all the time. Because what I say in the film is that the institutions will just go, hey, our job, and they literally say this. I've been in meetings where they say, our job is not to pick students up. Like that's not our mandate. Our mandate's just to teach people. If they don't show up, it's not our fault. And unfortunately, the government agrees with them. So what we see up here, and I hear this right from the horse's mouth, like from Skilled Trades BC that administers the exams for trades, they'll come here at Tea Creek and they're just all smiles because they see how busy our site is, and then they say, "Hey, we were just at this institution that got funded for 20 people. Only three of them have made it to the end of the program, and none of them can graduate. None of them have the competencies to pass the test." So I named that in the interviews, and it was in the film, and they ended up so the thing you should know about the film is it's underwritten. It's an insured film. So what that means is it was thoroughly fact checked. Everything that's said in the film was fact checked in order for an insurance company to insure it. Otherwise, CBC would not put it on the air. So everything you hear in the film is true and has been thoroughly fact checked and has been insured. So one of the funny things is they had me saying all of this, and so they tried to fact check it and basically were like, this is weird. We got the statement from the government, neither confirming nor denying this. So they ended up taking some of what I say out. So some of it's still in the film, but they're just kind of like, yeah, we're not exactly sure if they're confirming or so let's just like dumb it down a little bit. So that's the it's a racket. Like First Nations education in BC is an absolute racket, where the other guys don't seem to be motivated to keep First Nation students or get them into the class because a lot of times they get to keep the money, so why would you, right? And it's a very dark way of thinking, but that's just the truth. And that's one of the reasons we're so popular is that people have had that experience. And then they come here and they go, oh, wow, this is crazy. You're going to pick us up? Wow. So the end of that story is I got a call from from the college who, sees our success. And they were like, hey, this is great. You give rides. Like, could you give our students rides too and bring them to our college? And I laughed. I was like, this is hilarious because I've seen their financial statements. They have $20 million surplus that year. And I said to them, I said, so like I think you got this backwards. Like we're the underfunded T Creek. Like, shouldn't you maybe get a shuttle bus and like give our trainees a ride? They didn't like that. They didn't think it was funny. I thought it was hilarious, but yeah.
I'm just wondering about your training, like you have this amazing ability, it seems like, to get everybody going. Is that your natural self? Do you have training in that?
Hmm. I don't know. I would say it's mostly not me. I have a lot of insecurity around my teaching, actually. I have imposter syndrome, about this, about, like I say in the film, like suddenly becoming head of an Indigenous food sovereignty movement feels surreal and weird and wrong just because it's 2025. Like, how can this be, my dad was a teacher. So I don't know if I can take credit because if you were here on our site, you'd see it. It's an actually Indigenous-led site, and a lot of the magic is not me. I set up the kind of initial culture. I do work very long days, 12-hour days right now, and right now 7 days a week, just to keep things going. But a lot of what I'm doing is not teaching. A lot of what I'm doing is an obscene amount of horrible paperwork, and I actually relish the rare opportunities I get to be outside, and I relish the opportunities to teach now because it's so few and far between. So yeah, I don't know that I'm doing anything special. I just like to explain to people this is what Indigenous-led means. It's not a handbook. It's not procedures and policy. It's not a how-to guide. It's literally having First Nations people everywhere at every level of your organization making decisions all the time. And because they're Indigenous people, they're Indigenous decisions. And what we find is they're better decisions, like they're what work for us. So I don't need to be out there telling people what to say or what to think or what to do because I've got a really wonderful little First Nations team here, from top to bottom, that works together. And like you see in the film, like this is what we're trying to do is rebuild this team that works together and gets stuff done. So honestly, I can't take credit. I think that it's a lot of people here who work hard, and yeah.
You're setting one of your have rain enough for people who are farm. So having someone that's pretty justice on film come Thursday, pretty far out is like
Are you hearing that?
No, I hear word here and there.
You gotta say it to the computer behind me.
I think I heard Justice's name, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. Okay, we're getting him to come closer to the computer.
yeah.
Yeah, so would you consider sending your trainee Justice, for instance, to the Hoiston community? You already visited the farm with Raina, but
Yeah.
having someone like that, kind of like an inoculant from the Tea Creek philosophy and energy to the Hoiston community to inspire more of the community members, because we have Raina. That's amazing. So I don't know if you'd consider that. I think we can talk about it in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I can connect you with Justice. I think again, something really important to keep in mind when you watch the film is Justice. What you're seeing in the film is Justice over only 3 months, right? And it's one of the things I love about seeing that, watching that film, is seeing him at his first interview, which is early in the film, and then his last interviews and how incredibly powerful they are. And I tell people that was 3 months. Like he wasn't even with us for 6 months or a year. Like he did his first training, which was a couple week or a couple months. He graduated from the training and he was one of our later trainees. And so we kept him on until we were done harvesting. So he stayed on for an extra 2 months, I think. But you don't see the very end of it, but you see him over 3 months and you see his growth. Going back to the previous question, just really quickly, um, I want to again be very clear. I did not have anything to do with Justice's success. Very, very, very little. He's a product of our Indigenous-led culture here at Tea Creek. So, in fact, the scenes where you see Justice and I together, those were not organic. They weren't scripted, but the filmmakers just said, "Hey, we're going to probably focus on Justice and you. So could you go and do something with Justice at the end of the day and we'll film it." So that's what you're seeing in the film is like I didn't even sort of I had like I said 190 plus trainees and I was mostly in the office. So yeah, so I just want to be really clear on that. So yeah, I can definitely connect you with Justice. Justice is only he's only got a few months of training here, so don't think he's an expert or anything like that. But happy to connect you. And I when he was with us as well, like he said in the film, he was at kind of the bottom point when he joined us in his life, like very much the bottom. And he's had an incredibly challenged life. So I would just say, he's still got a lot of work to do and he's doing a lot of work. But, I would just encourage you to see him as a human who's, had incredible challenges and blossomed like incredibly, but in a short period of time here at Tea Creek. So yeah. He's not mine. Like I don't own him. He's not my employee, so I can't like offer to send him anywhere. But I can definitely connect you. I stay in touch with him on Facebook Messenger and ask him how he's doing, and you know, so yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we probably have one more question, and I think maybe then we can get going. Okay, Elizabeth.
I just want to know what we can.
We're wondering what we can do as individuals and community groups to support Tea Creek.
Well, I think letters of support help that you can send to us that we can use in a funding application to demonstrate support, which we sometimes have to do. But also direct action. And so a couple things. I do have a little video on this on the website. There's a website called, I think, teacreekfilm.ca that the producers maintain. And they asked me to answer frequently asked questions and put up videos. So they're there. There's a page of videos you can watch where I answer a lot of questions, including ones that weren't asked today. Well, this is one of the top questions. And so I believe what I've been saying is spread the word about the documentary, right? Like share it with your friends and family. Tell them they have to watch a Tea Creek film. And then it would really help if our folks in government heard from you, if you were willing to write them a letter and say, hey, fund Tea Creek, stop the BS. Like, what the heck are you guys doing? However you want to word that. Sending us a letter of support. And then lastly, monetary donations. Of course, if like we don't want to take money out of anybody's pocket, but there is a donate now button on the website that goes through our charitable partner, Farm Folk, City Folk, and we do get those monthly. Like they consolidate them and send us a donation every month, and that helps a great deal. So that's kind of it right now. Like if you're First Nations and you want to be on like our contact list, I maintain a list of what I call supporters, or non-First Nations, anybody who wants to be on the supporters list, email me, info@tcreek, say, hey, put me on your supporters list. I'll put you on the list, and I send out emails once in a blue moon just saying how we're doing at Tea Creek. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Glad I could join one of my hometowns. I lived in Lillooet for a little over a year years ago. So yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.
You take care. Bye.